everyone. I'm indeed Oswald. I'm from Berlin, from the Adaptive Systems Group, and basically in the group we are considering, we're not trying to design robots to do particular things, but we're trying to work with robots in a way so that they can actually find out on their own how to accomplish things. So some kind of developmental learning centered explorative processes. So in the context of this is also the work that I present now. So I'll start by introducing the robot itself and make a brief comparison to biology. And then I'll talk about the methods we are using and show some experimental results. So that's a Sphero. I actually found an image where it has a transparent shell, so I don't know if you've seen it. I've talked to a couple of people who actually know it. It's about 6 centimeters wide. It's a polycarbonate shell, and you can see it here. There is like a little card inside the ball, which does the actual actuation. The robot is pretty nicely engineered, so it's really robust. It has a specification of being like shock resistant for a 1 meter drop. And it's waterproof, and the waterproof thing is what we're going to use in our experiment. As you see here, so that's basically the experiment setting. It also has like a built-in stabilization subsystem, which is implemented on the little card, on the microcontroller. And we are actually operating it via ROS interface. So ROS is a standard platform in Office, which you probably know. Okay, so maybe a brief note about why are we actually doing this, putting the robot into the water. So what we are, simply what we are trying to achieve, or what we would like the robot to learn, is the ability to locomote. And not just locomote, but to precisely control a particular velocity. So it's basically about acquiring knowledge about this sensory-motor relationship here. So that's just a transfer curve of the motor output, like as observed from the outside, and the measured velocity response. So we just tell the robot, okay, please roll at this particular velocity, and then it's supposed to know, well, okay, I need to apply this particular motor value. But in the experiment, the robot starts with zero knowledge, so it doesn't know anything about either the sign of the actuation or the gain that it actually has to apply. Okay, so maybe I'll just show the video again briefly. So we have a first impression on what it actually looks like. So that's the beginning of the experiment. The color red is actually indicates the error measure for the task in this particular task. So it's actually the distance from the current velocity to a given target velocity. And so in this case, it's we actually have a moving target, so the target is jumping. Like the target velocity is jumping and it changes the sign, so it's rotating in one direction and then it's supposed to rotate in the other direction. So in the beginning, you just jump back briefly. It's actually already rotating, but it somehow picks up the wrong kind of lead and it's actually rotating in the wrong direction, so that's right. And then every time the target changes, of course, the error increases, and that's why it flies up. So basically, that's what we have this Sphero doing in the experiment. So we've more or less clarified what it can actually do. So we have two motors. We could actually access them really in a raw manner, but we can also use the stabilization system and operate it in a heading and velocity control regime or in a depending condition kind of thing, which is the one we are using in this server. So just to summarize briefly the sensory motor space we are operating in. So I'm considering it two-dimensional and a one-dimensional configuration. So we just start off with the one-dimensional thing because it's simpler to control. So like, with these dimensions, I really mean the outer dimensions, like the robot can just move along basically a line back and forth, and that's the one-dimensional setup here. It actually has more sensors. It has a full inertial measurement unit, so it can really measure acceleration and stuff, so it can do more, but we ignore that in this work. Okay, so, and I mean, if related to behavior, you might say, okay, just moving at a constant velocity is probably not really behavior, but we will state that these are at least prerequisites for doing any kind of more complex behavior. Like just moving certain figures in space, beginning to exploration, to maybe source seeking with the built-in Bluetooth hardware and so on. So we're really considering this acquisition process. So how can we acquire these primitives from a zero knowledge state? And in particular, and this is the last part down here, the closed loop scenario. So we don't want to have like we want to have a really fast learning process. So we don't want to do episodes and accumulate knowledge, but we really want to do it while it's behaving and immediately try and use every incoming sample of information. So if we look at biology and like the complexity of the behaviors that we can expect here, it's really about basic locomotion, and as I learned today in the C. elegans talk, clinotaxis. So this is just motion along some kind of gradient. So this error that we're actually substituting here can actually be seen as something like this. So really like moving towards a particular point in space is really just like moving one variable of the sensory remote space into a particular region. So this can really be easily translated into each other. So this relates to things like single-celled organisms doing basic taxis stuff, and of course the C. elegans one, and then the insects is very less clear, and it's also not so clear like how much actual development and learning is involved in these simple things. So it's a very roughly matching model, but it's more about the phenomenological complexity of the behavior that we're expecting. And there is another relation to what's actually going on in higher animals. So there's really like like let's say for a human, the entire motor system is really like a thick bunch of layers which are kind of cooperating, and at a particular level there's actually these are postulated kind of entities, like that we actually have motor primitives which kind of subsume the control of high-dimensional motor space, like single muscle fibers and so on, into a low-dimensional representation. And this is, for example, believed on the one to be done in the basal ganglia here. And what actually happens in that case is that even if you have like modulation of motion from higher levels in the brain, usually these lower levels will also be involved, and you do have this semi-autonomy at this level. So you really have this micro-explorative behavior at this particular level. You know, like motor jitter at a very low amplitude, which might serve to actually stabilize the motions at this level. So coming to the methods, this is clearly okay. It's related to all these things. It's clearly reinforcement learning problem, which is what I would say, but it's a very restricted domain compared to what reinforcement learning can tackle in general. And it's related to sensory motor learning in animals, and that's what we really want to write. I mean, you can produce like online on policy reinforcement learning algorithms. You could use like motion primitives where some kind of systematic prior is actually entering the action module, and use policy gradient on that. You could use like an internal model-based approach with like exploration of sensory motor space and using that kind of stuff. But to really focus on the inherent onlineness, we really want to exploit some Hebbian learning in that case, because it also delivers some kind of prior possibility in that case, even though it's a very it's particular type of neural network setup that we're using. It's situated in this reservoir computing field. So I don't know if you're familiar with that. I'll just try to quickly run through the basics. A reservoir subsumes these two approaches, active state networks and liquid state machines, like Hafner or kind of work. It mainly is a randomly connected recurrent network, which is this thing in the middle here, with just a population of neurons. And you have an input layer and an output layer. And basically what you're doing is, in terms of the plasticity of this network, is that you restrict the plasticity that you allow to these sets of weights. So the recurrent network itself is actually kept fixed in the simplest approach. There are other approaches where you actually try to introduce plasticity in this way, but this is related to the general large problem of actually training recurrent neural networks and the temporal complications that are getting there. So what is actually happening there, you have some kind of state expansion going from a low-dimensional state to a very high-dimensional state, which you probably know from kernel machines, where you're effectively exploiting the same kind of thing, and then you form a linear combination, which then are these output units at the end from the high-dimensional space. So usually these things are done in a supervised learning setup. In our case, we don't have supervised. We're not doing supervised learning because evidently we don't know the precise action that we want to take. So we need to resort to this approach. So we're having, that's just a basic foundation of a Hebbian learning rule. So you have a presynaptic activation, which is in that case the reservoir. You have a postsynaptic activation, which is the actual output. So usually it's cut here, and this is just self-amplifying, and then we need to introduce additional factors to actually guarantee possibility. And this is a modulatory term, and we use just a binary modulator. So whenever the modulator is non-zero, we get actual rate changes. And this is basically directly coupled to the reward that we're connecting to the system. So we take an existing model from Hertzer and others from 2012, where they're basically doing, they're training an oscillator, like a generator. And in this case, we have a kinematic system. So the system output is actually identical to the system state. So it's the simplest kind of thing you can have. And well, this works very well. So we extend that to the real system kind of scenario, which means, okay, you need to be able to deal with first and second order systems like velocity and force control. And the real part here, I mean, most importantly, I think it introduces this issue. So usually in Hebbian learning, I don't see it so much discussed that you actually have these multi delays, which you probably don't know actually. So we really need to deal with that and to use additional stabilization measures for the learning. So that's the schematic of our full model. We have the reservoir, we have two output units for the X and Y motion components. At this point we have the output baseline, and at this point we have some noise being injected onto that signal. And that is then fed to the actual motors. And then there is some delay happening here, after which we get to send the readings as a consequence of the actions that we did. And here we have our target, it computes some error and feeds that back along with the original measurements to the system, as well as into the learning rule, where the modulator derivation happens and the rate changes are computed. So from an outside view, the experiment looks like this. We put the Sphero in water. The baseline output is 0. We don't know anything. We add the exploratory noise and just keep on doing this basically. And every time the performance has actually improved in a particular time step. The baseline controller output is moved by moving the weights into reproducing that action based on that state. And this is a clear type of goal beveling, if you know that work. It's like local exploration as with regard to the policy output in that case. So that's a time series of one learning run, and I just want to zoom in the next slide on this particular region. So you see, you have this really quick transient in the beginning, and then the weight modifications are actually decaying here. So that's the particular zone we want to look at more closely. So at the top we have the baseline motor output, we have the exploratory noise added on top of that. Here we have the performance and an average performance, which is blue and green. And here we have, which just includes the norm of the changes to the reflector. So what these cute lines here are meant to indicate this motor delay. So we really have this 3 time step delay between your action and the appearance of the result in the assembly space. And you can also nicely see the actual correlation between the actions and what you're finally getting on the weight modifications. Okay. So we did these experiments with basically the same setup, just like trying different targets for the robots to learn. So these are like small statistics over a couple of experiments each, or like single learning runs, on the order of 10 in these cases. So these are just the demo of the error development for these results, and you can also, like, I mean, actually, if you're going back, there is an initial period included where everything is damped in order for the reservoir to be able to swing up, basically, where the learning is happening. So, but after a few time steps, actually you reduce the order by the error by one order of magnitude. And this is the one-dimensional case for a constant target, and this is the two-dimensional case for a constant target. And in the two-dimensional case, basically what we're doing, we're computing a single error for both components. So only when both components get better at the same time, we're actually doing an update, which is, it depends on whether you can actually decouple your different sensory motor variables or not. But this is a more general kind of method. And in these other 2 plots, we're actually doing like, as you saw in the video in the beginning, like jumping targets, and every time the target jumps, you see these error spikes coming up. And what happens here is, you can see that, and you will also see that in this slide here. Okay, I'll jump back first. The error doesn't get as low, nearly as low as in the constant target case, so it's actually some kind of premature saturation is happening here. And that's mainly because if you keep having these large errors, that means you need to tune the learner basically differently in that case. And I mean, since it's basically a linear system, in that case, this means that like training for the constant target basically gives you all the knowledge you need to have about the system, and then in order to control like for a moving target in the case. So what we're doing here is we're just comparing 2 controllers that were learned under different target settings. So the black line is the controller which was acquired for a constant target, and the red line is the controller which was acquired for a jumping target. And I mean, this relates to what we saw on the other plot, that the error would just not get as low because the weights saturate prematurely, and that's not the case. Okay. So at the end, and I'll sum up briefly. I hope I've demonstrated to you that we have a neurally controlled behaving artifact in the lab. We can acquire the control capability from scratch with zero knowledge about the polarity and the gain needed to do the controlled task. We're using purely correlational online learning. And I didn't actually mention this yet, but in this case, actually the cost or the error measure is really hardwired into this setup where you're actually training different models, you have actually more, that's more versatile probably, but it's just needs to be acknowledged here. So somehow the bottom line is, I mean, the speed the system picks up, the actual control does, is really like, it's pretty fast, so it's a couple of 10 seconds. So this really gives you the possibility to learn to control really quickly instead of pre-designing